have, for lack of a better way to term it, screening questions. I
Mhm.
like to ask, have you had recent marital trouble? What are your reasons for exploring this? What, if any, experiences do you have before this? How did they go? What happened? And they can seem a little intrusive.
Hey, I'm Jen, host of the Open Bedroom podcast, where you'll find topics of sex, dating, relationships, non-monogamy, and more. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Open Bedroom podcast. I'm Jen. Today I have Allie on. She is our first third. Am I doing number three? Third
Yep.
that we've ever interviewed on this podcast before. And, we often hear stories about couples making the leap into throuplehood, but we rarely get to hear from the third. So in this episode, Allie is going to share her perspective as the third in a relationship that she believed would go the distance. Through an unexpected connection and the eventual unraveling of that throuple, today we're going to dive into what it's like to navigate jealousy, hard conversations, uncoupling, mismatched expectations, which we've already heard, her and I already started talking about. And I was like, stop, we have to hit record. And deal breakers from the side of the person who joined a long-term established couple. I'm super excited, Allie, to have you on. This has been a long time in the making because her and I have been chatting for like a year. I was like, would
Yes.
you please come and talk to us? And would you kick us off kind of the way you just started talking to me about how, like, every conversation is about like how to protect the couple's relationship and like how do you add a third person? But there's really nothing out there about, hey, do you even want to be a third? And like, what is that really like? And how do you get treated? And how do you make sure that it's fair and all the things? So I'm just going to hand the baton to you. Take us
Sure.
through all of it.
All right. Well, thank you first and foremost for having me. I'm happy to be here after a year of talking about it. Initially, we had rescheduled because I went through a breakup, which we will talk about. So, yeah, I kind of have just felt this urge to really talk about my experience because I find I have a lot to say about it. My goal is to demystify thruples as well because I find that there's this misconception that anybody or the type of person that would join a throuple is somebody that is hypersexualized, super good looking model quality. We have this very Hollywood version of what thruples look like to your everyday person or somebody that's monogamous and hasn't ever explored it. And I'm just a normal single mom, middle class, hardworking woman. And I found myself in a throuple. So I feel like there's this piece missing where a lot of the articles and podcasts and videos and what have you is aimed at the couple, is aimed at surviving polyamory, making sure that you come out of it unscathed, protecting this core relationship. And that in and of itself has always been very problematic to me. And I'm speaking specifically more on the polyamorous side and less of the open relationship swinging, because it takes many forms, as we know.
Mhm.
Those types of relationships I'll operate on different rules, in my opinion. With polyamory and more serious long-term thruples or quads, whatever, the whole idea of protecting the core relationship is problematic because it gives the impression that it gives an automatic hierarchy, and that might not always be what everybody has agreed to or what everybody is aware of happening. So I'm just looking to demystify that a little bit and give it a more approachable face to talk about it, and also give some insight on being the third and that viewpoint that's missing from a lot of the voices today.
Okay, let's start right here. I have a great
All
idea
right.
of how to kick us off. So,
Awesome.
as the couple, I'll talk as the couple, you talk
Okay.
as the third. So, I know for us in our relationship, when we first started going, like, what would it be like if we had another person? It wasn't like, ooh, we need to spice up our life. It was like, there's things I want to try. For me, it was
Mhm.
like, I have always loved women and like wanted to experience being with a woman. like, can we try this together? Like, what could this
Yeah.
look like? You know, and I realized as I started my E&M journey that I have this huge capacity for people, and I really wanted more than one partner. And I found myself really feeling kind of lacking with just Scott and I. And we've talked about this, like, this is not a secret. He knows how I feel. And so for me, I was really excited to add a third person.
Mhm.
And so I think from like the couple's perspective, what you've already said, like there has to be some sort of alignment with how are we going to venture into this and how are we going to treat this person? How involved
Mhm.
do we want them in our lives? And do we come at this with hierarchy or not? Do we want them to move in or not? And there's all these things that you have to kind of figure out as you're tiptoeing in. And I think there's so many mistakes that we make at the beginning that hurt each other as a couple, that hurt the third person that's just trying to come and join and want to experience that. So I hope that the audience kind of feels that hesitation that I definitely had at the beginning, and that, oh shit, are we going to fuck up our relationship? And what if this is the end of us? And like, there's all this scary feelings. So I want to
Yes.
pass you the baton, Allie. Like, how are you feeling as a third, or how did you feel at the beginning coming in and going like, I think I want to try a couple? Or was it an accidental throuple? I see a lot of those. Like we were at the
Yes.
bar one night and we kind of picked this person up, and then all of a sudden we got married. Like,
Yep.
explain what happens with you and kind of how that third
Yes.
might feel apprehension.
Sure. So I've been a part of two thruples.
Okay.
One was a lot more short-lived, and I can sum that up quickly to answer your question that um, that was accidental. It was just something that happened. And that's kind of what happened here too with the more significant long-term relationship that I plan to focus on. Um, we we met on an online group that was, just aimed at talking about dating and funny memes about sex and stuff to that effect. And I saw a post where it was, listing if you're in an open relationship, your DMs are open, post about your couple and your partner here. Um, and that's how it happened. I saw E, I'll refer to him as E, post about him and his wife S. And I decided to reach out. I'd already been kind of having some banter with them on
Mhm.
this group. And I found them to be really sweet and approachable and smart and witty. And those are things that I'm attracted to. So it just kind of developed from there. We went from chatting regularly to being asked out on my first date with just E to start. It was always kind of pointed out in the beginning that E was going to be the one to, be the main contact at first, while S kind of came along. Um, so we had our first date, and we just kind of slowly evolved into a more serious. It was 2.5 years, and oops, we're a throuple. So that's kind of how it happened.
Okay,
uh,
I have so many questions. The
sure.
first question is, how does one find themselves dating a couple? Like, is this something that you were like, I've always really liked masculine and feminine energy. I'm gonna go find this with some married people. Or were you just like, ooh, they're kind of attractive? Or like, how does
Right.
this happen?
So I've always identified as bisexual to some degree.
Mhm.
I've predominantly dated men, but I can really appreciate women both for, just femininity, softness, that emotional intelligence that seems to come just a little bit easier. And so I find myself exploring ideas of thruples and ethical non-monogamy because I like having that balance. I like
Mhm.
having both. It doesn't always mean that I find I've needed that in other relationships. Like I've had monogamous relationships in between. Um, it's kind of been something that I've been more drawn to during periods of being single, where I'm looking for that deeper connection, and I find that that balance is safer feeling to me to have both at the same time. That's kind of how I've arrived there on both occasions.
I love this story too because you were the approacher. Like
Yeah.
you
Yep.
took the initiative. It wasn't that this couple preyed on you and they were like, "Hey, little
No.
lady, like we think you're real cute," which is kind of the seedy side of this, right? Like you were talking about.
Right.
And again, I never want to like shit on swingers. I've got lots of swinger
No.
friends.
Nope.
We're in the community, but we have dabbled a little bit in the community, and it's just a very different way of approaching. I think
Hmm.
having more than
Yes.
one person in a relationship. So I see more of that with that community, where they are kind of like, "Hey, little lady, let's pick you up at the bar."
Yeah, we
And I,
start to throw around unicorn hunting. Like
yeah,
that's the phrase I hear all the time. And there's certainly something to be said for that. When I approach, because as you know, as our story goes, it was initially supposed to be casual. It was supposed to just be
mm,
intimacy,
hmm
sex. This was a couple that had been dating since high school, and they really didn't know anything different. So I also have felt comfortable being the one to approach because I know that I'm going into it being thoughtful and intentional. And I think that for couples that I'm noticing want to open up and try new things, I like to think I'm a safe person to do that with. So to be the one to approach has just always felt very comfortable for me because I know that my heart's in the right place.
I love that. And I have lots of single poly female friends, and they feel
Mhm.
incredibly empowered to do the same thing that you just did. Okay, so
Mhm.
the other thought that I was having as we were having this conversation was like, A, what makes you want this, which you just told us. The
Yeah.
other is like, what are the kind of feelings that you might have as a third? At least when you're partnered, you have another person to kind of share your concerns with, or share your anxiety with, or share your excitement with. When you're a third, a lot of times you're not necessarily partnered with someone else. I mean, sometimes
Right.
you are. We've definitely dated married women. But like how help us like get in your body and your brain into like this is scary or this is really exciting and this is why. Like what are the feelings that come up for you?
So as you're saying that, what really popped into my head is that I have to point out that when we're starting a throuple, whether it be intentional or accidental, that there are really three relationships forming. There's one between one partner, one between you and the other partner, and then all three of you. Actually, four, because their relationship together too.
Hmm.
There's this give and take of different relationships, different dynamics that all have to mesh, which is why communication is so important. And that's something I will drive home every time. But so to answer your question, opening up and having to figure out where I feel comfortable expressing myself. When it happened for me in this relationship, my connection was always much stronger with E. It was in the beginning, I thought it was just because that was who I had communicated with most. As time went on, it really was recognizing that my relationship with S was more difficult because we weren't as good of a match. So how I opened up and my feelings and about all these things, I went to a lot of it with E first before he felt he could express it to S, kind of warm her up, and then we all would discuss it. But it was very rare, which was a problem, that me and S could have direct communication
Oh, wow.
that I felt was honest. And I say honest not with negative connotation there. It's more that I feel like she didn't feel comfortable being honest with me sometimes. And I think that that was well intended. And I think it was more about her her understanding her own feelings and how this all happened, and um, that it created a wedge. So that I had a lot of feelings on how I was able to connect and how I was able to express myself in this throuple
Mm.
because of that.
So I just wanted to move right into relationship dynamics, and then I was
Sure.
like, oh, hold on. Like we need to talk about mental health. Like we need to
Yes.
talk about the health of each human in the relationship.
Yes.
I'm sure you've had experiences with couples that are really in love and really in sync and really clear on their vision of what they're trying to bring in. And then you've probably had like this, where you like one person is like, I don't really want to do this. And the other one is like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the mouthpiece of my wife. Like,
Yes.
what is ideal? And maybe what's some advice for couples that are listening or singles that are, a third that's wanting to join a couple? What are you looking for in terms of a healthy human to go join and be in relationship with?
Yes. So something that has come up before when I talk about this is that I have, for lack of a better way to term it, screening questions. I
Hmm.
like to ask, have you had recent marital trouble? What are your reasons for exploring this? What, if any, experiences do you have before this? How did they go? What happened? And they can seem a little intrusive. And this is something I struggle with because I'm a straight shooter when it comes to having difficult conversations. I'm thoughtful. I'm not trying to be confrontational, but I'm very like, hey, let's have this uncomfortable conversation because it's necessary, um, and it's important to me. So I kind of, start off with those questions. And I guess what I'm getting at is it's really difficult sometimes to know how honest everybody is being if you don't know them well enough. And that's, again, not to say that anyone was being misleading intentionally, but I think the part I was missing when I asked questions was more about, like you acknowledged, mental health. And I say that because a big theme with our throuple was that my female partner S, I'm not sure if I indicated that, female partner S, she struggled with self-esteem and self-worth and just kind of finding herself while being in this really long-term marriage. I mean, they were married for, well, hold on, they were together for 20 something years prior to trying any of this. So a lot of her personality and who she was rooted in simply this relationship. So not knowing herself well enough outside of that affected a lot. And actually, I can say the same for E as well. Um, they all they knew was each other. So I guess what I'm getting at is to make sure that you're asking well-rounded questions about them as individuals and not just as a couple, because that's the piece that I missed is understanding
Mhm.
and having individual conversations first. Very much so, these conversations were had in a group chat, with the exception of me occasionally reaching out to E and asking for some input on how to approach S with something. Um, and that wasn't the right way to go. It created just a dynamic that wasn't sustainable.
Yeah, this definitely leads us into the conversation now about dynamics.
Yes.
There's so many moving parts to this, and I think everybody does things a little bit differently. Like we have kind of a protocol of how we meet someone new for the first time, get them into a throuple group chat, get to know
Mhm.
them, and then start parceling off to individual chats and individual dates and individual overnights and individual. And I will tell you, just me, I was kicking and screaming and not liking this. It's not that I didn't want Scott to have a one-on-one with someone, but he was so much better at developing an actual relationship with someone. And I was like, I don't really want to text like forever. I don't want a pen pal. I just want to go like grab a beer and have a conversation and get to know you. And our styles are so different that he would ask deep, meaningful questions about your thoughts on the universe and world peace. And like he would get to know people's souls in like 3 days. And
Yeah.
I would feel so far behind. And then I would kind of try to make it his responsibility to catch me up on, well, what'd she say? And what'd you learn? And tell me all about it. And he'd be like, you need to get your own group chat. Like you
Yeah.
need to learn how to communicate with people, Jen.
Yes.
So I really struggled for probably the first couple years of us being open. We've been open now almost for 4 years. And oh my God. But it was the best lesson that I ever had. He would just say, we are individuals let's focus on individuation here, and you're gonna have your own friendship with her and I'm gonna have my own
Yes.
friendship with her, and then we're gonna have a three-way, and then we're gonna have a group chat, and then we're gonna
Yes.
like, and I was like, okay, I've finally got the program down. So that's what we do. I'm curious, like, what has your experience been? What do you feel like works best? What doesn't work well? You've already kind of hinted a little bit about kind of like the gatekeeping or cock
Yes.
blocking. We could call it both
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things. The infantilizing, that's a word Scott uses a lot. He reminds me like
Hmm.
not to be his mother and like let
Hmm.
him have the conversations and not try to control everything. And yeah, so baton back to
Yes.
you.
So, yeah. So it's a great question. It's it's tough because without knowing somebody, I mean, in any relationship, it takes time to get to know them. So to just automatically expect honesty and transparency up front, that's really difficult to do. Um, and I say that because I trusted that what I was getting from both parties was how it was. So when you're looking at opening it up and starting a throuple, I've heard so many people do it different ways. I know people that have arrangements where it's very, one person is more interested in the mono-romantic side of things, and they're okay with their partner playing. That particular couple doesn't feel it's necessary for there to be communication or any sort of meaningful communication is more accurate between, you know, this person's other partners and the main one. They're hierarchical. So it might look a little different from that standpoint. That strong of communication isn't necessary. But if you're talking about a triad or, polyamory in any number, I feel very strongly that that open, direct communication, complete honesty is necessary from the get-go. Now, how do you find out if that's what you're receiving? I still struggle to answer that sometimes. And I think that it's kind of just a toss up. You are meeting new people, and it's a gamble with anybody, whether you're monogamous or open.
Mhm.
These same issues present themselves. How I keep hearing in my head, you can only meet somebody as deeply as they've met themselves. So if they're
Mhm.
not, if they haven't understood that level of themselves yet, they're not able to communicate with you on your same level. This becomes problematic in non-monogamy because there's so many different dynamics at play. So I guess what I feel I missed in this particular situation is that I really discounted how, and I say this, not to be hypercritical, but how emotionally stunted these two individuals were, even in their own communication, when I take a step back,
Mhm.
um, and how much that affected what they were able to tell me in the beginning. So I don't feel misled necessarily, because we've mentioned like the whole, unicorn hunting and stuff. That's not how I feel when I examine what happened here. It's more just emotional maturity mismatch. We weren't able to get the answers we needed because we differed so largely on what we were looking for and how honest we were being with ourselves.
Yeah, I think a lot of times you don't know until you get into it, you know?
Right.
You don't even know sometimes about yourself or
Yep.
your partner, like your primary partner. Again, I'm talking on the couple side.
Yep.
This has happened to us. It really has. And I think, at the beginning, I would say you have the best of intentions to not
Hmm.
hurt anybody, to not hurt other people that you're playing with, to not hurt your own partner. I know for Scott and I, again, back at the beginning, we had such very different ideas of what an open relationship was.
Yep.
His idea, and he's been using this word now for years, he's like, we're monogamish, like we're
Yes.
semi-open. And I wasn't like hearing ish or semi. And so I was
Yes.
just I'm like, we're open. And he's like, no, we're not. We're like this. And we're very focused on what we're doing here. And like, he had
Hmm.
this whole game plan for us in this container, that, like the masculine he was trying to set. And I'm over here like, we're dating everybody. And he's like, no, we're not. They're not dating everybody. So for us, I really did cause pain at the beginning. I caused pain
Hmm.
for Scott. I caused pain for myself. I caused pain for the first couple that we started sort of semi-dating, playing, trying to fucking figure it out. To the point where like I lost friendships. It
Yep.
was bad.
Yep.
P.S. Don't date your best friend. Don't fuck your
No,
best friend. Just
no,
don't.
no,
Even though they're there and
off
they're
limits.
available and they might be pretty, like, just don't do it. It's bad.
Nope, I couldn't agree more.
And then we just kind of learned, with each one, like, we went from the best friend date, then blew up the whole friendship and ruined our life. And then we went to let's date another couple. And then it was like parallel play because I wasn't supposed to touch the guy. And then it was weird. And then Scott was like, they're
Hmm.
just watching us have sex. Like, I don't want to do this. So then
Yeah.
we moved away from that. And then, so as we're talking about this dynamic creation, I love that you mentioned like there's so many ways to do this. And I think
Hmm.
I'm glad that we have language. Like a lot of people are like, why do we have all this language to self-identify? Well, me and Allie, in our world, it's because we need to understand what kind of open are you? Like, are you
Yes.
swinger wide open? Are you like polyamory closed quad open? Are you, there's so many different ways here to figure out when someone tells me that this is their dynamic, I can then sort of understand what I'm walking into and how they might operate. One
Right.
question I have for you is, as you were just talking a few minutes ago, I was thinking, I wonder if it's helpful for a third if a couple has already sort of outlined, here is what our dynamic is. Here is how we want to play. Does this match with you? And then if there were any like guidelines or rules or boundaries that was like communicated up front somehow, like how can we make this whole process easier, especially maybe for those that are listening that are like, okay, I think we want to open up our marriage, but we don't want to be like this couple that Allie was with, where they don't really know what the fuck they're doing and one's super not emotionally mature and stunted. Like, how do we make sure that we can fully show up as like our whole human selves, a healed, happy couple, and offer this package to somebody who might be interested?
I think the work that comes before that is most important, is having those open conversations with your partner. You have to be honest. You have to be honest about what you're feeling. You have to even be honest if you're not sure. I think that in a lot of these dynamics, we get either so excited, or by we, I mean, couples that are opening up so excited because it is exciting. It's something new. It's, a lot of times it's taboo feeling. And so we get a little lost in how are you really going to feel when you see your partner being loving with somebody else?
Yep.
How are you going to feel seeing your partner be intimate with somebody else? You have to explore the nitty gritty there, as uncomfortable as that is. And I think that as much as I fully respect meeting somebody where they're at and not pushing people, I do think that if there's ever a holdup on a certain topic, that partner feels unable to discuss it, acknowledge it, um, put their feelings into words, that's a signal that you still need to do more work. It's it is communication. I'll drive it home every time. It's better to have the uncomfortable conversation before something has happened and things are in hypotheticals than
Mm.
it is to have that conversation after there's been pain, after feelings have come up. There's always going to be feelings that you don't expect, which is again why the communication piece is important, because you have to have already established a good communication with all parties. That's why that foundation is important, because feelings are going to come up and you have to know that you can talk about them. You have to know that you can be honest and open. As a third, I felt like I was I was interpreting, I was having to fill in the blanks. I was having to glean meaning from behaviors and guess and wonder. And that doesn't ever, I hate assuming in anything. I'm always going to just want to ask about it. So when I was faced with a dynamic that didn't allow for that, there were a lot of things I wanted to just go to S with and be like, hey, I feel like I I I triggered something, or I upset you when I did this, or I said this, or when E said this. And I didn't have even that. I didn't have the ability to go to this. And I want to make it clear, this was not open relationship, you know, just with E. I was in a relationship with both of them. The way that they termed it was, you're a part of our relationship now. You're equal. And I think I missed the piece where I advocated for myself, because I knew the very first time that they told me I was equal that I wasn't, and I didn't feel that way. But because the communication piece was never well established, I didn't have the ability to make sure that everybody knew how I felt at the same time. And
Mm.
also the game of telephone, you know, my feelings are being filtered through another person. And maybe there were a lot of, not maybe, I know there were a lot of miscommunications and misunderstandings that came
Okay,
from that
I want
piece.
us to like play a game. So
Okay.
you are you now, and I don't even have to be the other couple. I just want to hear your responses.
Sure.
But I'm super curious if you are like you're interested in a couple wherever you meet them online, or they're in your local E&M group or whatever. How do you question them? Like, how do you interrogate them? Like, how do you know? Like, how are you like, okay, this is a green light? Like, tell us the questions that you would ask, or the things that you would look
Sure.
for, or like things that would be a red flag, or things that are green. Like, walk us through you as you with all the knowledge that you already have, and you clearly have this kind of put together and figured out.
Sure.
As a third, for other thirds that are listening, go.
Sure. So I have to apply this to the way that I did it.
Okay.
So the communication was established with one person. Usually that's how it happens. I've not heard often that it's both reach out at the same, like, you know, they don't just throw you in a group chat. It's usually you communicate with one before the other, at least in terms of meeting online, right?
Sure.
So my first question always is your partner okay with this? Is this allowed? Is this something you've discussed? Once I have that answered, I'll be honest, I'm usually a I need to verify kind of person. I usually ask, you know, is it okay that I reach out to your other partner and just quickly verify that this communication is, you know, something that they're okay with. I'll do that. I usually have follow-up questions about what is the level of involvement that your other partner wishes to have in this interaction. And I kind of go from there. In my experience, it's usually been that this other partner wants to participate. Once I hear that, I'm pretty big on, let's get into a group chat, or let's have a meeting, the three of us, go out for drinks. I try to keep it laid back, just like with anything else in my life. I don't want anyone to feel on the spot. And I definitely don't like for it to feel like an interrogation. So I usually lead with that. I usually say, I don't want it to feel like an interrogation. There are questions I like to ask because, you know, I'll usually share a little bit about the notion of unicorn hunting and how this can have a negative connotation to it, and how, you know, I want to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that everybody's doing it for the right reasons, that we don't have mismatched ideas of what this is going to look like. I usually preface it with that. And then the conversation is organic. I start off with, you know, how long have you been together? Have you explored ethical non-monogamy before? Tell me about these different situations and how they went. I'll start to ask about, you know, off limits, boundaries. You know, what are things you really don't want? What are things you do want? once I answer those or I get answers for those simple questions, it's usually more like, what are you looking to get out of this? What leads you to this first step of trying to open things? Um, and that's when usually once things are a little bit more clear, when I have a good groundwork, is when I start asking the tougher questions. Have you had marital trouble in the past or recently? Do you feel like one person is more excited or into the idea than the other? I like to try to
Mm.
ask to see if there's a mismatch of expectations or desires. Um, then I might lead into the more sexual side of things. Is this going to be, we're all going to play together? Are we going to play individually? Does not one person not want to play individually? Um, I will usually ask the female partner, have you been with other women before? I try to keep it, it's my line of questioning is not a line of questioning. It's organic and I follow the conversation. But those are probably the bigger points that I tend to ask. The piece that I found I missed and I'm going to suggest asking is about mental health. Um, and that's something that I find that I have to communicate. That's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but I think it's important. Um, I struggle with anxiety. I've struggled with depression. I've struggled with phobias. I'm very honest about those things.
Mhm.
Um, I've also been a domestic violence survivor. I've suffered different forms of abuse. I'm honest about that too. As uncomfortable as that is, I like to share that about myself because it it brings up a lot in relationships. Not necessarily that I feel like I have like outbursts or anything, but like it might come in the form of like me being surprised or reacting a certain way to affection, maybe something I'm not used to. If you had asked me before joining my most recent throuple, had I ever had a healthy relationship, I would tell you no. Um, I had nothing to compare it to, which is what led to me thinking, joining an established couple that's been together since high school is a great idea for me because they're going to be able to teach me a lot. But I missed that piece, asking about mental health, asking about things that make other people tick. So me sharing my, you know, abuse history and my mental health history was me trying to do my part of sharing these things that could affect this dynamic. I didn't ask enough questions about how similar situations within them could affect this dynamic. And I say that because in my throuple, um, one of my partners just struggled a lot in her childhood for her own personal reasons. They were valid. It took me some time to learn that about her, um, which is the norm in any relationship. Yeah, you don't typically sit down on a first date and start talking about abuse, right? But um, I just feel like when you're involving more than one person, when you're bringing a third into a couple that has already hashed out a lot of that stuff, you kind of have to play catch up. You have to know each other well enough to be able to share, like, hey, these are some, very raw things about us. I think it's necessary. So those are the questions I tend to ask. And those are some that I feel like I missed that would probably have been very helpful to know going into it. I think I might have approached communication with S in particular a little bit differently had I known some stuff up front. Not saying she had to, or either of them had to tell me, her deepest, darkest secrets, but just understanding that there was some hesitation for some very real reasons might have been good for me to know. It might have affected things in the long run. And also, I might have made a different decision when my throuple turned from what was supposed to be casual in the beginning to something more serious.
So much there. Like, there's so many things I want to say. I think I'm just going to start with, I think that those are wonderful questions, and they're all questions I ask. I'm the
Mhm,
one in our relationship that asks all of those questions
mhm,
always. Um, So it would be really fascinating to have another person ask me those questions.
Mhm.
And interestingly, none of them were like, what do you do for a living? What's your
Yes.
hobby? Do you raise chickens? Do you like sourdough? Like, none of them are anything really getting to know the other person, but these are like foundational questions that you need
Yep.
to be asking
Yep.
just to even see if there's alignment. Our
Yes.
story is very similar. Like I do the same thing. I usually start with our dynamic and I state it. I'll say, "Hey, I'm Jen, partnered to Scott, or wife of Scott. Scott's my husband. We only date women. We only date together, and we're looking for a long-term throuple." That's usually how I start out. Like we don't
Mhm.
just have sex with people anymore.
Right.
That's not fun for us.
Well,
Um,
once you've cleared up too, there was something I forgot to acknowledge.
yeah.
Once you've cleared up that you're looking for something more serious, those open up a whole other line of questions, something I didn't
Mhm.
ask. And I didn't ask because our more serious, direction that we took
Mhm.
was very sudden. It wasn't discussed, just happened. So I missed the opportunity because I was still processing to ask, okay, if we're starting to say I love you without discussion, I was actually kissed for the first time in front of his children without discussion, about were the kids going to know? Were our families going to know? How do you feel about talking to your families? I had already known that I've come to my parents with a lot of things. There's not a whole lot of things I can shock them on. So I don't shy away from telling my parents these things. And for the most part, with mixed results, they're pretty good about it. But what I found is that not everybody has that openness.
Mhm.
My partners very much so felt uncomfortable with sharing it with family. That's an important conversation to have because if you're looking at long term, other questions come up: cohabitation, shared finances, shared children. These are things that you talk about in a monogamous relationship in a couple. Eventually, when you start talking about taking things in a more serious direction, these things come up. It's the same thing with a throuple, which is why that communication piece is so important. Because if you feel uncomfortable to discuss these very big topics, you might not be doing what you think you're doing.
I agree. And I think it's this constant state of fluidity. Like I think about the ocean, and every relationship is fluid, even monogamous relationships, whether you realize it or not, either someone's growing or someone's not growing, and someone's moving and someone's not moving, and eventually you either move together or you get divorced. That's just what
Mm-hmm.
happens. It's even more fluid in an open relationship with multiple humans and each one having their own individualistic needs, and then you and how you're going to show up for them, and then you decide, like everybody has to be deciding, I think, in real time, like, is this still for me? Does this still feel right? Does this still I had a conversation. We have two thruples. So we have two girlfriends. For half a second we were in a quad, and then it quickly deteriorated into two thruples, which we're currently managing two thruples, which is super fun. And we really like both of them. And both women are single. Both women live over an hour away from us. And we try to give them as much time as we possibly can outside of our own parental needs with children
Yep.
and our own needs as a couple of what we need from each other. And so that has really been a challenge
Yes.
for all of us to
Yes.
realize I need more, I need less, I need this, I need that, constantly being communicative to each other about, no, really, this is what I need to feel loved. Like it was so cool. I sent Scott a voice memo this morning. I was leaving Jess's house in Springfield and I drive 2 hours to get home. So I have 2 hours to think. And I was like, oh my God, I figured it out. Like each one of us women needs something different from you, but they're not hard. So all you have to
Mm-hmm.
do to love me, I had just realized this the other day. I was like, I just need your hands on my body for an hour every other week.
Mm-hmm.
Give me 25,000 orgasms. Like, let me feel your undivided attention and your sexy, naked body slithering all over me for an hour. Like, that's what I need. That's all I
Yep.
need. Yes,
Yep.
sex would be great a few times a week. That would be fantastic. But like, I need the focused attention for an hour every other week. That's all I
Right.
need. I will be a happy wife for you. Jess figured out, she was like, I just need Scott when I'm with him, I want him to just be really present with me and I want to feel like he wants me. Like I want to feel desired and I want him to feel like rare. And she's like, that's it. That's all I need. Just when he's with me, not when I'm away, not, on the phone. That's what I need. And then our new girlfriend, Jocelyn, is like, I just need him to like text me twice a day. Just twice, just like, hey, good
Yeah.
morning, or like, hey, this is what I have for lunch. Like that communication stream makes me feel connected to you. And I don't care what the fuck you say, but I just need to see you in my text messages.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my God, babe, here you go. Here is your rule book, like, or whatever they call it in sports, your playbook, right? Like, this is literally all that you need to know about your girlfriends. You're welcome. I figured it out for you.
We did all the work.
I did all the work.
Yeah.
It's just watching and asking and having the conversations around like, what do you need? And then we just finished our September calendar, which was loads of fun
Ooh,
to figure out for all these
I love
people.
that. Do
And
you
then we
use an
all
app?
feel we
Is that how
use
you share a
Google. I
calendar?
was going
Oh,
to be like real complicated. In fact, you and I are in a throuple group, and I asked the throuple group,
yes.
what all apps are you all using? And there's quite a few different apps that there people are
Hmm.
using. But the
Hmm.
majority of people are just saying we just use Google. We use a shared calendar. So I created us a quad calendar for all four of us. And then everybody can see who's going where to whom. And then we try to swap houses. So I'll be with Joplin while he's with Jess, and then Jess can come down here and I can come there. And then I'm making sure I get enough dates with
Yep.
Scott. And then we're making sure kids got coverage and that they feel loved and they've got present parents. And to me, the calendar is the secret to open relating. You have to calendar your people's needs and your family's needs and your own needs. Like I have my self-care all in the calendar. Get a massage. Jen needs a facial. Jen
Oh,
needs to go to the
massage.
gym.
So that's we created a schedule on the fly. We had a schedule. We
Hmm.
created a schedule on the fly because, like I mentioned, it was supposed to just be casual. So initially, the schedule was Sunday nights. That was the schedule. Both of my partners came over on Sunday nights. It was easier because I have younger children. Their children were a little bit older, so they were more independent. It would just made more sense for me to spend time here, for all of us to spend time here. The other reason that we didn't spend a whole lot of time at their house is they rescue animals, and some of them, were very particular about strangers and stuff. And so it was just, easier for us to spend time here. As things grew more serious, we kind of hashed it out on the go. It was like I would communicate a need. I feel like I really need to spend more time with the both of you, or I would love to have more time with E alone.
Hmm.
Um, and that also came because of, on the fly discussions about needs. So, that's one of the beautiful parts of non-monogamy is that you get needs, different Mets need, and sorry,
No, I
different
totally got
needs
what you were
met.
saying. I was picking it
So
up.
flip-flopped it. S was somebody that needed a lot of alone time,
Hmm.
to
I've got one
feel
there too.
to feel
These are right over
secure,
there.
right? Um, I'm not that person. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on my alone time. Of course, I require it, but I don't need a lot of it. I'm a people person. I'm social. Um, he was kind of in the middle. He could go either way. He could be a homebody. He didn't mind going out. So here was our big plus was I liked going out. So I had somebody to go out with. We would
Hmm.
occasionally have S join us too. We would all go out together. S didn't feel like she had to go out more than necessary. I didn't feel like I had to go out alone. And that was the good balance. Same thing with like likes and dislikes. So me and E were both nonfiction people, how-to videos, documentaries, that sort of thing. S was more fiction. That was something we did together, or she could do during her alone time. S didn't feel like she had to be watching boring nonfiction stuff with us too, because we had alone time. So that's how we worked it out is on Mondays, both of my partners would come over. We would spend time together, usually because of schedules and mom duties and stuff. S would stay home, cook dinner with her children, um, have a little bit of quiet time before coming here. E would come right after work, cook dinner with me, run errands. We would have a little bit of alone time before S arrived. Then on Thursdays, I had alone time with just E. He would usually come over, or we would use that to do, outings, just the two of us. And then on the weekends, it was a toss up. A lot of times we did stuff together. Um, Sometimes it would just be E coming over. And that was a dynamic that kind of we grew into too, where I started recognizing that there wasn't a whole lot of individual time between me and S. And when I communicated that, we tried, but I think we had different expectations and we were just such different people that it was really hard to find things to do together that didn't feel forced. Um, and that's not to say that we didn't enjoy our time together, because we did. And I miss those times, because unfortunately we're not in contact anymore. I very much so miss the girl time I had. Um, but yeah, it's easier to fall into a schedule once you communicate those needs. I think those are first, second.
Yes, I totally agree. Okay. So let's like wrap this up with a pretty bow. What are we
Sure.
missing that you really, really wanted to talk about or express to other thirds that might be listening that are like, all the other content out there was made for couples. What do I need to
Sure.
know, Allie? Tell me.
Sure. So there's a couple of situations that stand out in my mind, times where I got my feelings really hurt. And I think that those are necessary to understand what I'm trying to communicate. First and foremost, as I described, the first time I ever heard "I love you" in person, there was no discussion about it. It was just this discussion that the couple had without me, and then told me how it was going to be. This is a common theme. It was because of that missing conversation piece, there were a lot of things that were decided for me. I didn't do enough to speak up. I spoke up, but not enough. This was evident in the last Christmas that we spent together. Um, we had agreed to spend Christmas with our respective families separately and then join together at the end of the night. I was here waiting. They were late, which was very unlike them, but I figured it was, just Christmas stuff, getting stuff together. So I got a text message saying, "Allie, I'm so sorry. My truck broke down on the way, and we ended up having to have my parents, tow us back or whatever. They had to scramble to get back. We're not going to make it today." This was hurtful because it wasn't their only car. It was still within the realm of possibility that they could have come a little late, still prioritize that time with me. Because seeing my partners of 2 years on Christmas was important to me. This was when I tried to express that I was hurt. I don't think I was being heard. And the way that I described it to E at the time was, "I know that you would not have let a broken down car stop you from seeing S on Christmas." And this was my attempt to highlight the inequality. He understood when I put it that way. Um, but unfortunately, because we were missing that piece of what the mutual expectations were,
Mhm.
um, it made it so that he couldn't say anything to comfort or make it right. So, furthermore, what led to our breakup was that I found we had different expectations, and those weren't communicated to me despite these things coming up in little ways before. We never had a big conversation about, are we ever going to live together? Are we going to share children together? Are we going to share finances? Are we going to be completely out and open to our families? How far is this willing to go? This was not a conversation we had up front. And that was my biggest mistake. Because what I found through arguments and hurt feelings was that E was always more on board than S was. Um, Not necessarily that S wasn't on board with trying it, but the boundaries that she had described in the beginning, no girlfriend, boyfriend stuff, no being out and about, and public with people, those hadn't changed for her despite the I love yous. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
it's hard because in my head, I'm thinking if I'm allowing or I'm okay with, and I'm watching it and not speaking up, I'm watching my partner say I love you to another person. In my head, I assumed because of the way that they handled every other disagreement, discussed it amongst each other, and then came to me with it. I assumed that that's what had happened, that there had been a discussion about, I'm going to tell Allie I love her. I still don't know if there ever was one. So when it came down to like, we're 2 years in, I'm watching my partners, they have one standard of living. They live, I'm not going to say that they were rich, but they were comfortable. They paid their bills. I am a struggling single mom of three. So when I start thinking about a relationship and how that grows and this is getting serious, yeah, these are questions I want answered. You know, what we plan to do with retirement. These are all these questions once things get more serious in any relationship dynamic that you want to ask. Because I hadn't understood expectations from the get go, when I came to these people with two different expectations, sets of expectations, we found how far off we were when we were already in too deep.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came the first time, because this was a series of two conversations, I came the first time to say, hey, are we gonna are we gonna share children? Are we gonna move in together? E was more willing to discuss these things than S was. S felt very attacked and she lashed out and at the time, made some accusations. It was based on something I had worded improperly. I didn't do the best at communicating either because I didn't know what I was walking into. Um, and there was an argument and we didn't talk. And then after a week, we rekindled and things were like, where it was left off was the quote I got was, "We are not people that tend to plan for the future. We do things as it comes, but I think we owe it to you to figure it out." When I was told that the first time, I took that to mean they're going to do the work to explore and understand and get more on the same page with where this is, where this is going to go. And that enabled me to, for another like 6 to 8 months, just trust that.
Mm-hmm.
When it had to come up again, I felt like enough time had gone by where it's like, I think it's reasonable to try to have this conversation again. It was very clear because one of the triggers and things we did not agree on was they did not want more children. I was open to either. Um, we tabled that. That was clear. It wasn't, we didn't get to it in a very healthy way, but we got to the answer where everybody was at with it. That was okay. I brought up cohabitation, shared finances. This is what I was more looking to get into because I was finding like, when we talk about the future and like, S was talking about when she planned to retire and I'm over here doing the math because they were a little older than me. I'm like, okay, what does that mean for myself? And, what does this mean for, shared assets? Are we going to buy a home together? I didn't have an idea necessarily of what I wanted. I just wanted to know where they were at so that I could make decisions for myself. Good case in point is in the beginning, I was told, I could explore whatever other connections I wanted, but they were just sticking with me. Because of how things were going in a more serious situation, direction, I stopped exploring other connections
Mm-hmm.
because I was so in love with my partners. I did myself a disservice by putting my eggs, all of my eggs in that basket without understanding. So the final breakup came when I brought up the notion of money and shared, cohabitation and stuff. S didn't want it, flat out didn't want it, wasn't even willing to discuss with me. I brought it up in the group chat. She didn't respond. I got a cold response from E. And it took multiple conversations where S was not contributing and E was communicating for S about her feelings and, you know, that she had started to grow away from the relationship and wanted things to go back to how they were. I was hurt because during this time that I thought that they were working out, you know, their desire. I thought I would be a little bit more in the loop if things were going in the direction that they were, and they weren't shared with me. Um, when E and I finally talked for one of the last times, he expressed, did not, I'm not the one that chose to end the relationship. I didn't want to end it, which leads to the next thing. You have to be aware if there's veto power. You have to be aware because I wasn't. I thought that it would be a mutual discussion. In hindsight, when I see how they handled conflict, I should have expected it, but I didn't. I didn't know that one partner, was just going to be like, nope, you have to end things with this person too. In my head, polyamory, a throuple, meant that even a breakup was decided between three people. If that's not the case, that third person should be informed going into it.
Yeah, I agree because if not, you're just treating the third person like a toy. It's your toy to
Yes.
play with. And
Yes.
I would say we've gone through this. We were in our first throuple, a long-term throuple. It was over a year. To me, that's long. I was like, if you're in a monogamous relationship with someone and you're together a year, you're talking marriage, you're talking
Mm-hmm.
kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit different in the polyamory world. It feels like you date several years before that you have that conversation
Yep.
a lot of times. But so we had something similar happen, and Scott wanted to pull out of our throuple, and so he's no longer in it, but her and I still date, and we've been together for over 2 years. So I think, I hope that as you guys are listening to this, that you are hearing from Allie and I that there's multiple different ways to be ethically non-monogamous and in open relationships, and clearly we talked about dynamics and all the different things to be thinking about as you're thinking about entering it, and am I a whole healthy human, and are we a healthy couple, and then as a third, like, you want to choose people that are healthy, that are gonna bring joy to your life instead of a whole bunch of stress because they haven't figured their shit out yet.
Yeah.
And then as we've ended this conversation, we've been talking about um ways to be fair in your throuple. Again, insert however many numbers, quad,
Yes.
I don't know
Yeah.
what Cinco five would be,
The
but
limit does not
the
exist.
limit does not exist, but man, over three is really difficult, let me tell you.
Yeah, exhausting.
And so just
Yeah.
to always be mindful that the person that you're seeing, especially as a couple, is not a toy. Like, this is a
Yes.
real live human. This is not Tamagotchi, like, this person has emotions and mental health and children and money and time and energy. And if you're going to have babies, there's eggs that need to be fertilized. Like,
Yes.
you can't just sit on someone's life if you don't see a future and you're not
Right.
communicating those things. So I also think within a couple, you are an autonomous individual, and if you don't want to walk away from a relationship, then you have to have that conversation with your partner that says, I
Yes.
mean, for me, my thing that I say to my partners is we don't just throw people away. So just because you've decided that you want to be a part of something and then now you don't want to be a part of something doesn't mean everyone else has to decide the same thing as you. If you're open enough to say, I want to be in this open relationship, you better be ready that things
Yes.
are going to change and people's feelings are
Yes.
going to change. And then, eventually you'll find yourself, if it doesn't last forever, you'll find yourself in a cycle where there isn't a third person, or you're single and you don't have a couple right now to date. And then you get to regroup. And that's the best time because you get to go, okay, what kind of relationship dynamic do I want to call it? Do I
Yes.
want to do this again? Do I want to roll the dice with another couple? Or do I want to roll the dice with another third? Or do I want to stay monogamous with my person? Or do we want to be more just kind of fluid and open E&M and see what happens? And you always get to be a choice. And I just hope that our listeners understand that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So as you were talking, something that came up too was, like I mentioned, the veto power that E expressed that he wasn't the one that wanted to end things. I approach every relationship, monogamous, non-monogamous, as I want to leave that person in a better state than where I found them.
Mhm.
And what haunts me about this situation is that I wonder if I created, what's the word I'm looking for? Resentment
Mhm.
between them.
Yeah.
Did I add this ugly little chapter? That's not what my intention was ever.
And I'm only agreeing with you because I've done it too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's human. It's not a
And you
character
just,
flaw.
when
It's
you're
just,
starting
it's
out,
what
give yourself a
happens.
lot of grace, right? Like
Yes,
you're just not an
absolutely.
expert.
Overall, I think everybody in the situation could really benefit to remember that when we are talking ethical non-monogamy, the word experimentation is a common theme.
Hmm.
Experimentation, when you are trying LSD and running through the woods and you
Yes.
fall off a cliff and break your leg, like that affects mostly solely you.
Right.
Those decisions
Oops.
affect your life, your health, your mobility for several months, when we are exploring with a person, that is totally different because your partner, your metamor, your casual boyfriend or girlfriend, they're not just a means to understand yourself, to answer your own questions. They oftentimes are looking for the same answers or similar answers, or maybe their own personal questions. You want to treat them accordingly. You want to treat them like they're a human, not just a piece of your relationship, not just this tool to experiment with. It that piece is what's missing a lot of the times when things go wrong, is that remembering that the third is a person, they have feelings. And if you are opening it up, they need equal equity in that relationship. It shouldn't be, this hierarchy that they didn't know existed, that they didn't know they were operating underneath. It's never going to end well when you have that.
Perfect place to end this podcast. Allie, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for
Thank
being
you.
you. Thank you for being brave enough to come on to this podcast and have these conversations because I know that they're difficult
Yeah.
and we need more of these from a third. So thank you for representing
Thank you
all
for
the
having
thirds
me.
out there. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.